It's time to talk Jacksonville Jaguars football on the Our Football Network. And when we do that, we take our attention over to Jaguars.com and invite John Oesher to join us. John, good to talk to you again.
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a great time of year to be, even though the season's over, it's a great time of year to be a football fan because we're all gearing up for free agency and the draft. It'll be here before we know it, and it's good to have you on again as we've had the last few years. Of course, you are the senior writer. It doesn't get any more senior at Jaguars.com. You've seen a lot of losing. But as we talked about before the season, a lot of hope, new coach, another year with Trevor Lawrence, and a very successful 2022 campaign.
Yeah, it was. I think fans and Jaguars observers would have liked to have gone a step further. They lost to the Chiefs in a divisional playoff, and had a chance at the end of that game with 5 minutes to go to score and make it a tight game. And had a chance, had they scored late, to hold the Chiefs and have a chance to go win it at the end. I short of going further and maybe winning it all, I don't know how a Jaguars fan could look at that and say, boy, what an incredible season, for a couple of reasons. Not only was it incredible in terms of the drama of the moment, they had 5 come-from-behind victories at home in a row to close out the season, including the one everybody saw over the Chargers, which was, historic.
Yes.
But it also had a tone, Greg, of, not being a fluke, meaning you had Trevor Lawrence, you have a young receiving core, you have things that are together. You have Doug Peterson,
Yep.
who I think solidified already a deserved reputation as being a head coach who can coach something for the long term, and who knows how to get a team there. So, boy, what a difference 7, 8, 9 months make. And it's as good a time to be a Jaguars fan. I don't want to demean what they did in 2017 when they got to the
Sure.
AFC Championship game, but because of the quarterback situation, because of the frame around it, because of the culture, and I hate that word, but it's real here.
Yeah.
Because of how it feels like it's the start of something rather than, oh, we missed that opportunity to get to the big game, which they did in 17.
Yep.
And there certainly was maybe an underlying feeling of, I don't know if they're going to get back. This feels, again, to use a word that's overused these days, sustainable.
Most people would agree with you, especially at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
We're really at both the head coach and the quarterback position. Those are the two main focal points of any franchise when you're trying to build long term, and Jacksonville seems to have both now in place. So it's just a matter of building around those two. And that's why this conversation is important, because we look at the cap space, and I understand, and I think everybody understands by now, or should, that minus whatever doesn't really matter as much nowadays with cap numbers. General managers kind of know and expect from year to year where they're really at. So where is Jacksonville at, even though it says they're about $20 million under the cap?
Well, I think the key thing to remember is there's only a couple of teams in the league who, and we're going to get football 401 here a little bit. There's only a couple of teams in the league that haven't pushed money out into the future yet, meaning, you mortgage your future a little bit. You've got salaries that are creating a lot of dead cap space down the road. For the most part, the Jaguars cap, they're on top of it, meaning it's all happening in real time. They haven't extended with signing bonus and amortizing things yet. That sort of starts now. I don't think you can build a sustainable roster in the league without doing some of that. That's where they're at now. They'll most likely release Shaq Griffin, which will save them a lot of money against the cap.
Okay.
There's a lot of room to restructure things because they haven't done it already. So it's clean now. Again, to use another word that GMs love, they have a pretty clean cap. It'll get muddied up a little bit as they go forward now because you have to. This is where Trent Baalke starts sort of doing some of that. it's hard to know right now exactly where that'll come from. But in terms of what they can do with the cap, they can pretty much do what they need and want to do. They can re-sign their own guys if they so choose, but they're also still at the very beginning of this process. Meaning they have Trevor Lawrence to try to re-sign. Beginning next offseason, they can do that. There's young guys. So while they could do whatever they want, they're still at that position. I don't know if they're all the chips in team yet, if you know what I mean. I don't know if
I understand now.
boys,
Yes.
we have to go re-sign X. They can be smart. But I think because of the quarterback, they also believe that they're about to become a franchise that can revolve a little bit around that. That doesn't have to have, boy, we have to go have X receiver or Y receiver. I think the hope, obviously, when you have a guy like Trevor Lawrence or Pat Mahomes in terms of contract, I think we can all assume that at some point Trevor Lawrence will take on that sort of cap and contract responsibility. Well, when you're that guy, you have to lift everything else.
That's right.
You have to be the main cog.
Yep.
I think there's an assumption here that Trevor Lawrence will be that. I think they have to assume that.
Yes.
So I think they will allow themselves to sort of be smart about guys rather than having to go all in. And I'm sort of referring to Jawan Taylor. They'd love to get Jawan Taylor back, the right tackle. But I also think that there's going to be a limit to where, okay, we have to still be smart in what we do around here.
And you mentioned Shaq Griffin coming off the injury. More than likely, you think he's going to get cut. And if that's the case, are there any other players that are under contract that you think may be in jeopardy of being cut?
Yeah, not as clear cut as Shaq. And Shaq was signed in the 21 off season. He was one of those guys that I think anybody who follows it closely, when teams sign free agents these days, the vast majority of them are on those extended deals, but they're really 2-year deals. And that was what Shaq was. He didn't play after, I think it was week 6. They were 1-5 with him, or I forget or 2-4 with him, and then they went on their run without him. They figured it out without him. Nothing against Shaq Griffin,
sure.
But it feels like that's, if you're looking for space to cut, that's $13 million or $12 million.
Yeah.
So it's sort of obvious. I think that will cause them to go after corner in the draft and figure that part out. They still need to solidify that situation. But frankly, he hadn't played at a great level when he was playing. So I think it's pretty logical. There's nobody else who really fits that.
Okay.
Now, there are certainly guys who could, but I think that's more what I would call conversational, meaning I think the team is looking at it and saying, okay, we've got, say, Roy Robertson-Harris, a defensive tackle, paid very well. Jamal Agnew, Rayshon Jenkins, all three of those guys were key to what they did. There is room in their cap to where if they hadn't played well last year, they would be very obvious cap casualties. But what they did, and credit to them and credit really to the organization, I think, when you sign those guys, oftentimes you're saying, boy, I would love this to be a problem in 2. Well, more often than not, it doesn't get that way. Free agency is usually just a mess.
Yeah.
They did remarkably well with free agents. So now they sort of have to look, hey, do we try to restructure Roy Robertson-Harris? And I think those are the possibilities. I don't have very much insight, unfortunately, into sort of where they are, because right now this is still that conversational time. I anticipate at the Combine next week to maybe start getting a little clearer case of how they might try to be extending guys going forward. But there's really not anybody besides Shaq that just sort of, hey, that's sort of a no-brainer.
The other interesting story is going to be Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
So, especially with Marvin Jones, a free agent, the big contract, Christian Kirk last year. So he's definitely a part of the long-term plans with Trevor Lawrence, or you should imagine. So, Ridley, is this a situation where it's just a bonus if everything works out, or are they really expecting him to just pick up where he kind of left off with Atlanta, and he's going to be a big part of this offense, and that's how they're looking at it regarding their offseason plans?
Yeah, maybe, maybe a little of both, and I'm not trying to sort of head, but it's. I think it would be a bonus if he's an absolute one out of the box, because that's going to be a tough call. Their approach was they gave up a 6th round conditional, which turns into a 5 if he's reinstated. So a 5th round pick, and then a 4th round pick in 2024 that can turn into a 3rd of playing time.
Okay.
It can turn into a 2 if he resigns. So their approach really was, wow, we've got a chance to get a guy who has the ability to be a 1 at pretty low risk for trying to get that guy.
Yes.
If it doesn't work out, then you've given up a 5th and a 4th. I think most teams would take that chance. And the way the season played out, Marvin Jones was great leadership and great clutch for this team. But realistically, he's a free agent, and he's going into his, I think it's 11th or 12th year. I'd be surprised if he's back either way, just because I think Marvin and the team are ready to sort of move on at this point in their career.
Okay.
And I don't know that for sure. But it just sort of feels that. And then you have the strangely fortuitous, I guess you would call it. You've got a guy in Ridley who Marvin Jones was basically the 3. All of a sudden, if Ridley is who they think he is, he steps in and can be the 1. It's a little bit of a strange thing in Doug Peterson's offense, because there's really no true 1 in the way he runs things. But he's certainly a guy who would be perceived as a number 1 receiver. And then all of a sudden, the roles all make sense. Ridley can be the 1. Zay Jones, who had an outstanding year as a free agent, all of a sudden is a really good pure 2. And then Christian Kirk, who was outstanding this year, playing a lot of different roles, is a really good slot, if that's the role. But now they would all play different roles at various times, but that would feel right. It would look perfect on your depth chart, if you will. And then you've got Evan Engram sort of complement, who I think will be back. So if it works out, then I think you've got one of the better young receiving cores in the league, and one of the more balanced. And maybe that's extreme, but in this offense, the way these guys played together, it's going to be productive if those 3 or 4 guys are playing level. And it really worked out to where all of these guys really fit what Doug Peterson wants to do. I don't think they're in a panic situation if Ridley isn't what they thought they were, because they're good at Zay, Christian, and Evan Engram. But if he works out, then all of a sudden you look and think, okay, where are the holes in this? And you don't see very many.
Yeah.
So they're good without him. If he's what he was turning into before he left, then this might be, for this team, they would have never had a receiving core history as deep. Keenan McCardle and Jimmy Smith back in the day were top level guys. That was 2. And it's such a different area. It's such a different area. I hate to even bring that up, but that foursome of Ridley, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, and Evan Engram, plus Travis Etienne in the back, that's the 5th. Those are 5 guys who can all make plays, and it all of a sudden turns into an offense that was just, if you think about it, Greg, fewest points in the NFL in 2021. To be sitting here 14 months later and look at every position through the top 5 skills and throw Trevor Lawrence in with 6, pretty remarkable turnaround.
That's why, as I said at the very beginning, we as fans, we love the NFL at this time of year, because this is when these types of decisions and changes are made to your team, and everybody hopes it all works out. It doesn't normally, but it's so far working out for Jacksonville after just one offseason. Now we'll see about this offseason. You mentioned Engram. So we were talking about this on our show, Dave Syvertson from our lads, about players like Engram who find a home, and they've got the young quarterback that's just going to get better, and the coach and the team. And what if an outside source, another team, throws money at Engram that's more than what he can be offered at Jacksonville? What does he do? Does he go, I'm taking the money? Or does he say, hey, this is a great place for me. Why would I want to leave Jacksonville? This is a perfect spot for me. It's just my numbers are just gonna continue to improve. Yes, even if I don't make the money that I'll make by signing that deal elsewhere, I'm gonna be smart. I'm staying here where it's gonna boost my career. Do you think that's part of it when you sound confident he's gonna be back? Or do you just think that another team isn't going to offer him as much as Jacksonville might want to pay him? Or do you think Jacksonville is going to try to match whatever it is that he gets offered?
Well, I think they'll franchise him.
Oh, okay. Well, that answers that.
Now, I'm not saying that will be the first move that they want to do.
Okay.
But I think he would probably be tagged before it got to conversations about the team matching. But even more than that, even more important in the Evan Engram conversation, both sides sincerely want to get it done.
Okay.
Evan Engram really wants to be here. Now, I'll say it in answer to the question you just asked. Money is never not part of the equation.
Of course.
And often in the if-then scenario that you presented, it's really not just, okay, if over here and then over here. It's more in the middle. Within reason, Evan would really love to be here, and I think would maybe take a different looking contract, maybe a little less to be here. Now, he's not going to be stupid about it.
Of course.
Yeah. And so, but within the framework of the NFL, within how these players think, I do believe he really wants to be here and really gives strong consideration, because I think he's a really smart guy. And really gets the NFL. He learned from his experience in New York. I think he understands, hey, if I play with Jacksonville, play with Trevor Lawrence, I've got a chance to have a very meaningful career on a good team and probably fit into what they're doing here for multiple years, which, as you know, and I think a lot of fans sometimes miss, usually that second contract with a different team usually winds up being a 2-year deal with one more out, and then they don't find the fit, and then they're out of the league.
Yep.
I mean, there are some other cases like that for the elite guys, but for a player like Evan Engram, who turned into starting to fulfill his potential, a lot of times that's the pattern. I call it 4-2-1. You play for 4, and then you sign for 2, and then your contract, and all of a sudden you're out.
Yeah.
Well, Evan, it's interesting here because Evan, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, these guys like this, I think they have a real opportunity to be long-term fixtures on this team.
Yes.
And that's rare for free agents to sort of turn into a core that way. I would be surprised if Evan Engram doesn't sign a long-term deal and they get something done.
Okay.
Only because usually both sides say they want to get something done. That's usually what you hear in the media.
True.
With this, I really get a feeling that it's sincere. And usually when it's sincere, sides figure out a way.
Okay. All right. So, by the way, when you take and let's say Engram is signed, and you mentioned, okay, let's say Ridley, and you got the top 3 and everything, top 5 skill guys. But as you mentioned, well, what happens if one of the guys goes down? Well, we still have Engram. But at the receiver position, the wide receiver position, do they need to add another player there?
Well, they have Jamal Agnew, who was sort of a Swiss Army knife guy last year. He's improving dramatically as a receiver. He has a lot of value as a returner, but he's a unique guy. I don't know if they necessarily want him to step into the number 2 role if one of those guys goes down. I don't know that he's there.
That's right.
So they have a kid named Tim Jones, who has really flashed, who they really like.
Okay.
Again, they were fortunate with injuries last year. I don't know that they are going to feel like, man, we have to go out and get a name guy as a receiver. But I could see them going after receiver in the top, first 2 days of the draft.
Okay.
If the draft falls to them that way.
Okay.
And, it's the old thing. I don't think they're pressing it. I don't feel like they have to. I don't think they're feeling like, oh, man, we got to do that in round 1. But it's something to keep an eye on. They were fortunate last season in that when they took injuries, they took them at positions where they could afford it. I don't know if receiver next year will be a spot that you feel great about if they have a run of injuries. But I mean, that's sort of the case with all teams. But they could certainly stand to develop a guy at that spot.
Okay. On the offensive line, you mentioned Taylor. So if he doesn't return, does Walker Little just slide in to right tackle? Is it as simple as that, or is there another potential plan in place?
My guess is that's how it would play out. I think they would probably, if they can't get Taylor re-signed, which is going to be hard because he's a right tackle and the numbers are going to be pretty dramatic. But they love him and they really think he's important. So it's going to be interesting to play that out. I would guess that Little starts over there with the importance of having three in this day and age.
True.
Left, right, and swing.
Yep.
It would be surprising if they lose Taylor, if they don't address it in the draft with a guy that they feel like could be swing. And I'm sure that if you draft a guy you feel like can be a swing, then you probably go into camp saying, it's a competition, we're looking at it. But logic would tell you that you drafted Little in the second round in 2021. He has played well in both of his stints when he has been asked to play. So you wouldn't think you would move that guy to swing, meaning Little, even if you drafted somebody.
And at left guard, do you think they're looking to upgrade that spot?
Well, Ben Barch, who got hurt 4 or 5 games in the season, they like him.
Okay.
I'll sort of lean on the cliches in this thing. I think it's true. If they, I think they'll draft that spot because somewhere, not first round, but I think they'll try to address it in the draft because they saw last year the importance of, Barch gets hurt and Tyler Shatley comes in and played at a very high level. Cam Robinson gets hurt and Little came in and played at a high level. Had they not been able to go 7 deep, they're in trouble last year. So I think they really feel and believe in we got to have 7 and not 5.
Yeah.
So I could see them drafting. I could also see if Little if I keep saying that if Taylor returns, I could see Little pushing Barch at that inside spot, trying to get the best 5 in the field. But they like Barch. Barch was hurt last year, so you sort of get out of sight, out of mind. But they would be fine if Barch plays. They don't have a drop off, and the franchise will be fine with that.
Okay. Also, at some of the backup spots, and then we'll turn to defense. Arnold and Mannertz are free agents. Beathard's a free agent. What do you think? Most of those guys coming back? Any major changes there?
Probably, I would guess out of the bunch, they'd really like to get Manhertz back.
Okay.
Probably a little unfair to call him a reserve. He's probably a 6th offensive lineman kind of guy. I know we like to call that blocking tight end a reserve in this day and age. They're a good running team, and they ran and blasted some key holes at key times. He's a big part of that. So they'll effort that. And those 3 guys, I would think, will really be a matter of, okay, are we comfortable as you lead into free agency? Are you having conversations with agents? Okay, are we comfortable bringing them back? I think they'll probably try to draft receiving tight end somewhere. I don't have a good feel for what that'll mean for Dan Arnold.
Okay.
He's been very good when given the chance. There's also this reality with some of these guys we're talking about, that even if they want to keep everybody, and there was really nobody on this team that they don't want to keep because they had such a good year and the chemistry was working, everything was sort of going in the right direction. Realistically,
doesn't work out that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So Arnold, I don't have a great feel for C.J. Beathard. I know they love him, would love to get him back. Sometimes that backup quarterback number can get weird when you're trying to adjust the cap. Because that number can get high compared to what you really want to put into
Sure.
it. So and again, I don't have a great feel for that one. I know they love CJ and would love to get him back.
Are they okay if Etienne were to get hurt? Do they feel we drafted Connor last year? He's going to have another year here. Hasty. Do you think they're going to be okay there, or is it?
Well, it's almost a risk that you've got to take sometimes. No, I mean, I don't think anybody thinks they would be okay because they've got a few special guys on this team. And when ETN is going, he's special. So he had, I think, 9 or 10 runs over 22, 23 yards last year. Doesn't sound like a lot when you say it that way, but there was a streak there every week. He was reeling off a 23, 25-yard play. But that flips field, flips momentum. I mean, that scares defenses. That was a big deal for what they did. I don't know that Hasty was really good at times last year.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's that.
Sure.
But I also don't know if there's a lot of guys who are that.
Of course.
So,
yeah.
So are you going to draft – are you going to take a third-round pick so that you can maybe get a high-level backup for ETN? I think you would love to have 2 Travis Etiennes, if you follow me, but you'd also love to have 2 of a lot of things.
Yeah.
So
sort of like the wide receiver position we were talking about. If it falls your way, yeah.
Yeah. Here's the way to look at the Jaguars right now. I think they're going to lean offense-centric because it feels like you've got to lean one way or the other in the league these days. They've got a lot of skill, and they've got the potential now offensively. They improved from basically last. They were 27th, 28th, and 21. But basically worst offense in the league to where they're top 10. And last year, when Trevor was right and hot, he was as good as any quarterback in the league. Now, he wasn't consistent at that level, but we all saw him against the Chargers. The way he's playing in the second half of that game, I'm not saying he's Mahomes, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. He's that level.
He's got the ability, yes.
So build around that and get to special. Then I do think this will be a team that, if you're sitting there on draft day and see impact offensively there, see weapon offensively, I think it's going to be hard for them to pass up because, boy, one more that can do something special, then you're talking some high-end stuff. So, again, as you know, hard to know because the draft plays out as it plays out.
Yeah, sure.
But sitting in that war room, if Doug sees something and Trent sees something where it's a wow, boy, it's going to be hard to pass that up.
Okay, got it. Noted. Defensively, would we be right to say that out of the positions, the defensive line being the top need right now?
Probably. I mean, they're in a little bit of a tricky spot because they were good at times last year. They were better against the run. They were disruptive in some key spots. And there weren't really any liabilities, but they're also outside of Josh Allen, who I'll consider defensive line because pass rusher. We're talking overall front 7. They also didn't have much special. So at some point on the defensive front, I still believe in Josh Allen. I think there's a lot that he can do. He can make plays. Trayvon Walker developed last year, still has the potential to do that. But Arden Key also did that at times.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's not really a Chris Jones, and again, there aren't many of those guys out there.
But isn't that why they drafted Trayvon Walker?
Yeah, at some point, and that's really the big thing that as we go into defense, the reality of this team defensively is this. Last year, they drafted Chad Moom, 3rd round. Devin Lloyd in the 1st round and Trayvon Walker in the 1st round, number 1 overall. They were all good players. They were all a reason that this defense was stout, solid, NFL playoff caliber defense when you get there.
Yes.
for this team to get to a next level defensively, that's a highly drafted core of linebackers. They need to have that year 2 jump and be special and form a core. That's how they can get better defensively. I don't know if it'll happen. Potential's there, but they drafted those guys to be the core. Hard to expect it as rookies. We all know that. We expect a lot of rookies, but it usually doesn't work out that way. But that's really their avenue to big-time improvement defensively. Draft and develop, well, year 2 is when you need to see that.
Yeah. So I got to ask you about Fatukasi. Has he? Cause it seemed like, now I don't know if he's playing out of position, because it seems like when I look at the numbers, I see where he's been playing. It seemed like it seems to me like he's playing a different position than we played with the Jets. I might be wrong. But it doesn't look like he's having the impact that he had with the Jets. Again, I could be wrong. Is he? Are the Jags getting what they've wanted out of Fatukasi?
Yeah, he had a few injury issues last year that sort of, I think, kept him from having high impact. Again, I think they brought him in to be a nose tackle who was disruptive and overall make that defensive line stouter. I think there are a few games he would like to have back, but I think a lot of those were injury related. I feel like he made them better. I don't know that they signed him expecting superstar.
Sure.
So I would say he's another guy. He needs to improve from what he was. For me, a lot of they had unreal success with a lot of their free agents last year. He was probably a guy who was maybe 5th or 6th on that list.
Okay.
That sometimes those guys go through the same year 2 jump.
Yes.
So I think they expect that from him and hope that from him.
Okay.
Again, I would not say that they looked at him and thought he was bad.
Sure.
In any way. I don't know that there were the impact plays, and I think they would just like more consistency out of that spot.
Yes, because as we were talking about, I mean, the talent, whether it's Walker and Lloyd and Josh Allen, you throw Muma in there, it's coming from the linebackers. So that's why you think that when we're looking at the draft, the first pick, do you see, and I know it's early, but do you see there being a player or several players that might fit Jacksonville, or again, just being that might be the position they go early?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure about specific players yet, but to me, I think the good news for this team is they truly are in a spot where at 24, they can sort of take any number of positions and help themselves. And I don't know that they're desperate at any spot.
Okay.
But I would be surprised if cornerback is not a pretty major look this offseason, only because Tyson Campbell played at a high level. Darius Williams, who they signed from the Rams, played much better late in the season when they moved him out to outside corner.
Okay.
But that sort of left nickel.
Okay.
They had some serviceable stuff going on at times, but I could see them wanting to add 1 corner, 2 corner into their mix and sort of see where that falls. They're in a little different spot because, could Darius move back inside? Yes. Could he play outside? Yes. I don't know that he's nailed down anything in terms of his role. Tyson Campbell, they feel great about, but that is certainly, there were times last year, and I say this overall about the secondary. There were times last year where they were getting better pass rush than their numbers indicated, and the coverage really struggled in the back end and didn't allow the pass rush to get home.
Okay.
So that would be the spot where I think they believe they've got to figure out some way to get better. It's the old cliche, rush and cover, the combination of that. But last year, there were a lot of times where teams could get stuff underneath. They could get stuff. They could get rid of the ball fairly easily against this team when it was a fierce pass rush. That got better late in the season, but I think you'd like to see more consistency there too.
Yeah, it's a nice early deep class of corners from what we see so far.
Yeah.
that it looks like, and there's no clear number one. So I think this is going to be one of those drafts for cornerback that a team that might pick the third or fourth cornerback could end up with the best one. So,
yeah, and I think that fits into what they need to do. I mean, they were not even last year. If you think about it, they were 9-8, and they were 2-6 at one point. Then 4-8. There were holes on the roster that they overcame with some big time performances, big time moments, but defensively, that secondary, there's some spots there where they could get better and be more consistent there.
And that also includes definitely you believe in nickel.
Yeah, I mean, they had some good performances at nickel, and they eventually found some answers there that I think they'll feel okay going forward if they have roles. But I think they would like to have more impact consistency back there. And
what about Jenkins? Because I know he has, he's got a contract that looks like it could be moved, but I haven't heard you mention that. And I only bring that up because Wingard is a free agent. Any chance that they sign Wingard and move on from Jenkins, or could they sign Wingard and restructure Jenkins? How do they feel about that spot?
Yeah, I don't know. Wingard is a big-time special teams player.
Okay.
And he is a player who has carved out a role in the NFL. I mean, I love Dewey. He is a guy who you want on your team. He's a guy you want around. And he's probably going to have a 10-year career in the league. I don't know that they want him as a starting safety for 17 games, mainly because his role on special teams and everything else is honestly so important.
Okay.
So that's not necessarily guaranteed that Rayshawn is back, but Rayshawn played it because of the contract you're talking about.
Yes.
But he's another one of those guys who I think if this conversation was taking place last year, I would have said I'd be surprised if Rayshawn is back in 2023. Their two biggest plays defensively of the season were a pick six that Rayshawn had against Dallas where he took it all the way, and a sack fumble that turned into a touchdown against the Titans that Rayshawn Jenkins had. He has a knack for making plays and a knack for being important on a team that I don't know if it mean renegotiation or if it mean trying to do something with the contract. He's a guy that has played his way into a situation of them wanting him around.
Okay.
And again, a pretty remarkable thing is in the NFL, usually once a guy sort of plays his way to being out of a conversation, but that honestly speaks more toward the weirdness of 2021 around here than it does Rayshawn Jenkins.
Okay.
So my gut is that Rayshawn's back.
And at special teams, do they feel comfortable now, or they still feel like there's got to be some competition at the kicking game?
Yeah, I think they're comfortable. It's kicker. Riley Patterson did a really nice job, and he solidified things. Yeah. He had some big kicks down the stretch, and from watching him and from watching kickers over the years, I think he's going to be a kicker in the NFL for a long time, and my gut is he's going to be with the Jags.
Okay.
But sometimes kickers have seasons where you look at it and go, oh, man, there's no doubt that's the guy.
Yeah. They're like goalies.
Yeah, and I don't know if Patterson had the opportunity to have that kind of a season. Sometimes kickers get put in situations where they can go be money, and they prove it. Patterson had some big kicks down the stretch and did everything he was asked to do. They weren't in so many game-winning situations where he absolutely proved it, where it's like, okay, we've seen that 7 times now. You follow me?
Got it.
So I think he's their kicker going into next season.
Okay.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think he probably needs one more year of
prove himself. Yeah.
Money kicks. And again, I don't want that to sound like it's a knock on Patterson. Sure. I just think usually with kickers, it takes some circumstances for them to go do it.
Yep.
And he did it. But usually you got to see it 4 or 5 times before you've watched a lot of games.
Yeah.
Sometimes with kickers, you don't even bother watching it. And like when Justin Tucker kicks, you go to get a beer, you know it's going to make it.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's there yet.
Yeah.
But every time you stay and watch it, he makes it. So I think he's fine.
Okay. And just a couple more things. One, you mentioned a lot of young players. Is if you had to pick a player, one of those young players, especially like either the second or third round guys like a Cisco, a guy that the team expects to make a big jump. As you were saying, they're looking now to let's get some of these guys to step up. Would Cisco be that guy, or maybe somebody else that they're expecting a big jump?
Interestingly, and I'll say this, and you're gonna think I'm crazy, they expect it out of Trevor, to be honest with you, and because Doug Peterson really believes in year 2 in the offensive system. Trevor was really good at the end of last year, but they really believe that there's stuff there in terms of ease, in terms of seeing it quickly. Doug talked a lot last year about sort of muscle memory, and he got better in the second half of the season when they were going to plays that he had run 2 or 3 times. You saw that comfort level. Okay. But, I mean, I know it's not what you're looking for, but anybody following the Jags, that's a thing to look for, because if he does that, then all of a sudden they're a team to watch for a long time.
Yeah, that takes care of a lot of holes.
I think Cisco fits into what you're talking about. I think maybe even Tyson Campbell fits into what you're talking about. They still got a lot of guys who were key guys who are going into their 3rd year next year. But as I just talked about with Trevor, their 2nd year in a system. The feeling around here is that you started to see it in the second half of last season. Once these guys got comfortable in the system, all of a sudden they ran off, 7 of their last 9.
Yep.
Cisco would fit into that. But the obvious choices are the 3 that I mentioned earlier. To me, a huge storyline that won't get talked about enough, because everybody, fans, observers, they all want to talk about the draft and free agency, new guys. The key to this team to me is how Trayvon Walker, Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma, can they become core guys on a defense and special?
Yep.
If they do that, then all of a sudden this defense improves 7 or 8 spots.
Yep.
Then you're dangerous.
Yep.
If they don't, then there's some uncertainty over there. So to me, that's storyline 2 beyond Trevor Lawrence's development.
And by the way, I know I've asked you this like every year. It seems like that we've talked, but is this it now for Chason? Is he just not going to fit in here?
Well, it was funny. I would say that, except he missed half the season last year with an injury. So it's easy to say that he's not going to fit because he hasn't had the numbers, the whole thing. But at the same time, if you're them, meaning if you're the Jags, you're looking at it going, you know what? We came in with a 3-4 defense, new scheme last year, and we really only saw this guy for half the year. And in the second half, he was playing a lot. I think one of the problems with Chason, he wasn't really a pure pass rusher coming out. He's more of an off-the-ball, athletic chase guy, and he did well with that last year. So he's uncertain because of the cap number, because he's in year 4. All the things that are on the surface very obvious. But there's enough there where I'd be surprised if they don't give him a shot in year 2 in this system, healthy. Let's see what he can give us. He's going to be depth. But, sometimes you don't want to cut talent in those spots, because if you need it, all of a sudden they can flourish. Meaning, Josh Allen gets hurt, he goes in and plays, and you've got a first-round pick playing there. Hasn't lived up to it, but isn't that better than the undrafted guy?
Yeah, usually, yes.
So I think there's that element of him. You don't want to cut good talent.
Sure. And by the way, Jordan Smith as well. I know he was not as high of draft pick, but there were expectations for Jordan Smith that he hasn't been able to live up to.
Yeah, he very much a question mark. Didn't play at all last year because of an ACL before the season. So he's your classic out of sight, out of mind. Very unfortunate when that happens in your second year.
Yep.
Then all of a sudden you're rehab, and going into your 3rd year, you're an unknown. I don't really have any idea how to answer something about him because of all those unknowns.
Yep.
Like him, like his talent. I know they're pulling for him, but stay tuned.
Yeah, it's a big year for him.
Yeah.
Okay, John, I appreciate it as always. Can't find a better guy to turn to that covers the Jags than you, of course, right there, the belly of the beast at jaguars.com. By the way, do you have your own show that you do during the season and the off season?
Yeah, Jaguars Drive Time is our big show. I also do a Huddle Up podcast on Wednesdays with Bucky Brooks of the NFL Network, who's
Oh,
pretty tight with the Jags. So we have pretty much 3 times a week off season, and then of course, every day during the season because the beast is never fully fed.
that's no question about that. All right, John, great job. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you after the draft.
All right, Greg. Thank you, buddy.
You got it.